we were begging for palliative care because he was now dying. They hadn't have even given him the most basic of mouth care. All his lips had gone and all his mouth was bleeding. They'd not even given him water. And he was screaming. He was screaming for 24 hours, and I was on the phone and I was begging them. You know, he said, well, he's dying. So I said, well, give him some palliative care. Like, give him the drugs that they said that they would give on palliative care.
I'm still involved very much with the vaccine injured. Yes, I'll always do my due diligence on anybody that I'm personally involved with. There is a path of good, there is a path of evil. Choose to be on the side of humanity and choose to be on the side of good.
Welcome once again, folks, to another edition of the Plannedillusion News Weekly. And for this edition, I've brought back a very special guest, a guest that I had on pretty much early in the very first few episodes of Plannedillusion, when we pretty much first started off. This was 2 years ago. And I've got with me Ria Heslop. Now, if you were around back then, we're talking 2021, Ria's father had just recently passed away. He had taken the Pfizer vaccine late sort of December 2020. And unfortunately, the experiences that he had shortly afterwards, suffering from the adverse reactions, having to go into hospital, and the treatment that he received, unfortunately, meant that he passed away and unfortunately died a pretty uncomfortable death. And his daughter, Ria, who's here today, unfortunately was privy to the events that led up to that. And her plight was brought to my attention back then through Stephen Wells, and it was decided that given what she had witnessed and what we were finding out, the truth of the adverse reactions from, for example, the AstraZeneca and the Pfizer vaccines, it was important that she would get the story out. But I'll tell you what, even I wasn't prepared for the detail and the experiences and what she revealed. So, it's kind of a double-edged sword, but I'm going to say it is good to see you again, Ria. I know that you have you've been on quite a journey, haven't you? You've gone on to create your own organization off the back of the experiences that you had with dealing with your father, and you've also gone to expose the stories of many of the vaccine injured and the stories that their family wanted to get out there. So once again, a warm welcome to you, Ria. How are you doing at the moment?
Thank you for having me. Yes, it's still very tough. 2 years after my father died, and still been very, very involved with vaccine injured. It's still very tough. And everything that's obviously happened since.
So we're not long, sort of after 2 years after your father's anniversary. Just very briefly, tell us, for those of us who are just coming on to view this video, who haven't seen, I believe it was episode 11, I believe it was, or episode 13, who don't know the backstory. Can you just give us a brief summary of sort of what happened shortly after your father back in 2020 had received the Pfizer vaccine?
Yeah, so my father was one of the first in the UK to have Pfizer vaccine, and it was December 2020. Within 2 days, he became bedbound with severe neurological problems. Didn't really even know his name. And then he started to throw up huge amounts of blood. I've actually got a healthcare background, and I knew that something wasn't quite right in regard to going forward. And I put a record app on my phone because I knew this was an adverse reaction and I didn't know what was going to happen. So his GP was very supportive and admitted it was probably an adverse reaction and he had to go into hospital. And before he went into hospital, I made sure that with the trust that he could go onto the ward with him and that he could have us and carers around the clock. And I was told yes. Got into the hospital and we were, well, actually my autistic sister was escorted off the ward by 8 people. And that's when things were so bad in that hospital. Initially, they actually completely dosed them up with every antipsychotic, every midazolam, haloperidol, just everything. So we managed to get him out of the hospital, and it was really like trying to get somebody to escape. We got him home, spoke to his GP, and by this time he was incredibly unwell. And his GP arranged for nurses to come in, but we just couldn't look after him. And he's now jugfuls of blood, I mean literally jugfuls of blood. And I've got all the recordings, everything, with the nurses, doctors, etc. So we agreed for him to go to a different hospital, which was outside of the trust. And again, we were reassured that he was going to be, because of the extent of the gastric, he would be put on a gastric ward with a gastric specialist. Followed that ambulance, and he got admitted, and suddenly, exactly the same, we were out of the ward. Spent all night trying to get through, and then we were told that he was put on what was called a red ward, which was a COVID ward. He didn't have COVID, he was an adverse reaction. A long story short, then spent 7 to 8 days trying to get on this ward. Couldn't get on. Managed to get a journalist involved who threatened that they was going to expose it, and got onto the ward. The day that we got onto the ward, that morning I spoke to a consultant, and the consultant told me that my dad was doing well. He was sat on the chair. Again, I've got the recordings. But when we got there, it was utterly horrific. He was in a side room. We got there and we were literally locked in this room. They'd withdrawn all his medication. He was in bed. He looked like somebody out of a concentration camp. He was covered in bruises. They had given him any essential medications. All of the inside of his mouth was missing, bleeding, his lips bleeding, he was screaming. And I knew that obviously he was very near death. We begged at this point that he didn't have any medication, so no end of life medication. We then begged, literally begged. There's me phoning, having to phone the ward because my father's screaming. I was begging them to give him some end of life. They didn't, and he was like that for, well, we got there about 9 o'clock in the evening. He died 3 hours the next day on the 21st of January 2021. And he died screaming without any palliative care. And that was horrific.
Yes, I mean, unfortunately, once again, my commiserations. Hearing that story brings back some, bad memories for myself, because I remember the shock and the horror both myself and Stephen, experienced just listening to your account, and also the implications, because essentially what you were saying was that in addition to the adverse reactions from the jab, your father, once he was admitted to hospital, essentially was separated from you. So he's separated from his loved ones. That's the first thing. He was then deprived of food and water, and is essentially malnourished to the point of death. Now, the thing about your story, Ria, is that for those naysayers, there was a subsequent research done by independent journalists. For example, Jackie Devoy, an independent reporter, she put out a documentary. I believe it was an inconvenient death or something like that. And also people like Kate Shemirani, came across various accounts. And then you yourself, when you reached out to the general public to find out, what their experiences were, you also found out that unfortunately your experience and your account was by no means an isolated one. In actual fact, when you tally everything together, especially with Jackie Devoy's research, this was, in all fairness, a protocol for death that had been put in place for quite some time, but COVID gave them the plausible deniability. Just because I'm going to get you to go into that in more detail. Am I overstating it, or have I got that just about right?
Yeah, I mean, we've known for the longest time that the Liverpool Care pathway has been, it was exposed by the Daily Mail in 2012, I believe. And obviously that was exactly what happened to my father. And we know when they closed, they put a lockdown on the hospital, and your loved ones, you weren't allowed to see your elderly or your vulnerable. That's in care homes and in hospitals. It was absolutely the prime time for them to implement that mass genocide. It really was. And we're all very aware that happened. And I know from what I saw, and later on from other families that I spoke to, and not all. I'm not saying the whole NHS is bad, because obviously I'm in the UK. I'm not saying everybody. I can't tar everybody with the same brush. But from looking at it from my father's point of view, and also seeing other people on the ward that he was in a side room, that was very much in place. And I have to say, from what I knew later when I was dealing with, we'll talk about that, how I went on to deal with other families. And I dealt with a group of amputees later on, and they were AstraZeneca amputees, lost a limb, etc., and they were treated the same. So I think, I don't want to overstate this, but I believe that the ward that my father was taken to, that the staff are almost chosen for that. And I will say that there's lots that I've experienced since, and so many I've spoken to, and it was in place. It was all in place. It was planned.
Look, I'm going to say that, look, at the end of the day, we can all talk about anecdotal evidence, but at the end of the day, we have to look at the experiences of the wider community to get an understanding of, first of all, the truth about what's happening to our elderlies, and to understand also, were there any sort of political, was there a political landscape with which this was set against? And, you know, we won't go into that just yet, but certainly the evidence that had been presented by so many different people, whether it be in Canada, the US, here in Australia, and with you guys there in the UK, would seem to suggest that there was motive there to, should we say, shorten the lives of those who were over 75. Now, that might seem a horrendous statement to make, but it's not until we start to look into, for example, the evidence that Ria picked up from her organisation, which we'll go into, and then, as you say, you look at the video that was done by Jackie Devoy, and go back and have a look at the last, I think it was Genocide of the Elderly that Kate Shemirani did late part of, I believe it was late part of last year, and also the account from nurses working in the environment who came forward, whistleblowers, who came forward to admit that at 2020 hindsight, the protocols that were put in place were killing people, and that they themselves questioned these protocols. Okay, but anyway,
I mean, I've recently been in contact with a doctor. He was a consultant cancer doctor, and he, in 2020, when all this started, and he spoke out, and basically now he's the GMC of taken his medical license away, and he actually stated he couldn't not expose this, and he basically said that people weren't getting the care, they were being locked down in care homes. So there are many doctors and many nurses speaking out. I can only go by what I saw, and I can only go by when I went on to speak about the organisation that I started. When I went on to speak to so many families, it was the same. But it wasn't only that. We're talking, there's many things to cover here, because it's not just the elderly that were, locked down in hospitals, and, they didn't.
Indeed. We'll touch on that, because let's face it, the media, and it would seem big tech was also complicit in the cover-up of what was going on. And I can say this categorically because, for example, when in social media, a number of people put up posts, for example, Stephen Wells, he did a very passionate speech. I believe it was in Western Australia back in 2021. He put the video up that was put up on YouTube. I think it attracted no less than 2 million views, and then it was unceremoniously taken down. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, so I think that was the first time that I saw censorship. So I did a video, I personally did a public video, and it had millions of views. And quite quickly I saw something, and that was on Facebook. Quite quickly I saw something happening there. There was incredible censorship. Steve Wells got my father's story out, and that was in a rally that he did in Australia, and it was up on YouTube. But again, I think it had 2 million views, and that disappeared. Even my father's eulogy that I did was taken down off YouTube. Going fast forward, we'll talk about when I set up the organisation that I set up, No More Silence.
Sure.
And the censorship there, wow. There's a lot I can tell you about that.
So let's talk about that. So, okay. So, folks, Ria, she is still in mourning for her father, you know, back in 2021. You know, we're talking months after he died, a pretty terrible, harrowing death in all fairness. But, you know, not deterred by that, she heroically decides to reach out to the wider community. And I believe it was you set up an organization called No More Silence. It was actually, in actual fact, it was almost like an outreach platform for either the vaccine injured and the bereaved to upload their accounts of what was happening. So can you give us a bit more of an insight into that?
Yeah. So initially, I didn't know how to process. Sorry, it's 2 years on and it's still difficult to talk about. I didn't know how to process what I'd seen, and also Pfizer were involved in this. I mean, I remember listening to the phone call that I made to Pfizer when I reported it. And the head of Pfizer, her exact words were, in our clinical trials, we have had no reports of adverse reactions, which obviously we know is total lies now. So I didn't know how to process this, and I couldn't talk to anybody about it, because, you know, if you talk to your family or the wider community, suddenly everybody's getting this vaccine and you're suddenly alone in this. You have your husband, but it's new to you. You don't know what's going on, and suddenly, you know, everything you do is being censored. So first of all, I started up just my own Facebook page. And what it was me trying to process, and I was trying to find out other people's stories. So initially it was just a Facebook page, and I put up my father's story, and within no time at all, the inbox on my Facebook page was flooded with the same. There was deaths, there was severe adverse reactions. These were for all over the world. So I started sharing them just on Facebook initially, started sharing the stories. And there were so many. My husband's got an IT background, and I said to him, is there any way that we can set up a website? Because there's so many people want to tell their stories. The media won't tell them, the mainstream media won't tell them. And before I knew it, you know, we set up a website with No More Silence, and we then had different ways to tell the stories. They would send their stories in. I had somebody doing interviews, and we financed all of this. And before I knew it, we had a team of 12, and that was people collecting stories. We had so many that we couldn't platform them all, and literally we had them coming in from all over the world. So No More Silence just grew, and this was vaccine injured deaths. By this time, all the vaccine, J&J, Pfizer, AstraZeneca, Moderna, and it became a safe platform for people to come on, share their stories, and to be heard. And it grew so big, the website was having nearly 80,000 hits a day. We couldn't cover all the stories. I mean, there was literally hundreds coming in a week, hundreds. And at the same time, I had somebody running my Facebook page for me, because by this time I'm, so involved with this. And to this day, I think, there's about 120,000 followers on my Facebook page. And I got very, very involved with the vaccine injured. And I know so many of the vaccine injured, and still do. They're still friends to this day. Some very, very well-known public vaccine injured. But in that time, I was dealing with, for instance, AstraZeneca. We had 8 amputees, and I was dealing with the Amputee Society and trying to get, I used to help in reablement, where you take people from hospital to home. And of course, when you become an amputee, suddenly your home isn't fit for purpose anymore, because it needs adaptations.
Sorry, Ria, can I just stop you there, just so that it's clear to the viewers here?
Yeah.
Are these amputees before the jab, or are these amputees as a result of the Pfizer or the AstraZeneca?
No, so they're all these amputees in the UK that I was involved with. They were after AstraZeneca.
I mean, that's quite staggering. Look, I'm going to say I'm sort of editorializing here, but because I was also I was a member of No More Silence, so I was privy to some of those pictures myself. But I need to give I want to make sure the viewers have a clear understanding of what was going on here. So the AstraZeneca vaccine wasn't just, and you know what, guys, you can go to the Yellow Card website and also theirs and have a look at some of the more extreme adverse reactions, and lo and behold, amputees. There are a number of amputees who have actually registered what has happened to them as a result of. But it's not until you've seen the pictures, isn't it, Ria, that it really hits home. So these were people who, before the jab, were fully functioning, fully abled persons, weren't they?
Yes. Yeah. I mean,
can you give us an indication of, so if just off the top of your head, the worst case that you remember, just off the top of your head?
Well, I dealt with a lot of deaths, lots and lots of bereaved from the AstraZeneca. And yeah, there is a case, and you won't mind me saying, her name was Janet Abernethy, and her husband, George, died of the AstraZeneca. That was horrific. It was a horrific case. The ones that I was very involved with, where they were in hospital because of amputations. One is a very public case, a gentleman called David Mears. Dave was actually a British karate champion. I think he was in the Olympics. And this was an example of what they used to do to the amputees. So you become effectively displaced, meaning that your house isn't fit for purpose. It needs adaptations. So I had already worked in re-enablement, which means trying to get some, before COVID, and that's getting people from hospital to home. And it's setting the correct occupational therapy in the house and the correct care packages. And I noticed with these amputees, they were hidden, it was horrendous. They kept blocking family going in. And I can even get these people on. I was dealing with the Amputee Society. And what they did to these amputees was they didn't adapt their houses. They weren't given prosthetic legs. Dave Mears and 3 others that I was involved with, after they've been amputated and because of AstraZeneca, and their wound was healed, they were dumped in travel lodges.
Unreal. So I mean, that's absolutely shocking. So again, because I can hear, the critics. So let's just be absolutely clear and absolute. So what was it about the jabs that was it causing a blood disorder, muscle wasting? What had transpired such that the result was or had to be amputation?
No, so it's clots. So AstraZeneca was known, there was vaccine-induced thrombocytopenia for some people that was devastating. Again, we've still got a lot of people alive, but they're totally disabled. So VITT for a lot of people. So it was causing clots. So there would be a massive clot in the leg, the groin, and they would end up having, Dave Mears, his story was horrific. His leg almost exploded, actually. It was disgusting. But yeah, most of them, it was clots. We've got amputees, a lot of amputees, but I know many people where their clots are so bad that they're 2 years later, they're still having operations because of clots. But I know a young girl that is now, clot in the brain. She is now completely 24-hour care. Not very old, she's 34. She's bedbound, and it's horrific. Her life is horrendous. But they're all hidden, and No More Silence gave all these people a platform. But that's all that happened. I also worked with an incredible solicitor that has been helping some of these vaccine injured go through the compensation scheme, and a lot haven't got it. But my understanding, so he's called Peter Todd, and he's a vaccine injury specialist, has been for about 22 years. But he's actually doing a class action against the government. I believe it's on AstraZeneca initially. But you don't hear about these people. We hear about these people. No More Silence hear about these people, but they're not in the media.
Indeed. Yes, I know that here on Plannedillusion, I did cover a particular case of an individual. I believe he was an ex-rock star, and his girlfriend had been sort of campaigning for. I think you know who I'm talking about. Yeah, what was her name? Sorry, Ria.
She was called Vicky. He was called Zion.
That's correct. Absolutely right. Thanks for my memory. It starts to fail me this time of night. But no, so that was absolutely right. And she managed to get some, but it was a lot lower than what was expected. And from my understanding, they dragged her through the courts basically before she could get anything. And when I covered that story, there was a sense that the British government were trying to appease the general public by giving this perception that there would be compensation for the most extreme cases. But that's not necessarily that's not your experience, is it, Ria?
No. So the compensation is £120,000. That's if you're dead.
That's nothing. That's nothing.
It's not been changed apparently for 9 years. So
Wow.
But you've got to prove, if you're still alive, first of all, you've got to prove that it's the vaccine. So if they've passed, and that they've passed, and I've got Peter working with some, even very young cases where they've died of the vaccine. But the doctors know that they died of the vaccine, but proving it through a court, they can't do that. And if you're alive, then you've got to prove that you've got 60% or more disability. Now, what was really incredible was a couple of our amputees. So remember, these people, you know, they've no longer got a leg, and some of them are above the knee. And one of the cases, it went to court, and because he could walk with his prosthetic leg, he was deemed then not to be 60% disabled. So,
Wow.
so it's a complete farce. It doesn't stack up. But I think for me, I have been involved with thousands, or No More Silence, involved with thousands and thousands of cases. We already know around the world, we know the numbers, we know that one officially now, even by Pfizer's own count, 1 in 800 people have an adverse reaction to the Pfizer vaccine. That's without all of the others. I still support to this day a lot of the severely neurologically damaged from Moderna and Pfizer. And in the States, it's even worse. There's nothing. There's absolutely nothing for them. But going back to this censorship, when No More Silence came up, and I don't know when you want to discuss this, but that was crazy. I was then in a world that I knew nothing about. Our website was taken down. We had to flip it between different servers. The DDoS attacks. We even had, in the end, we had this whole team of software engineers, whatever they're called, working on it. And we had all of everything being written back to 2 different IP addresses, and we couldn't hold our own database any longer.
So essentially, what Ria is saying basically was that the website was hacked. She referred to a DDoS, that's distributed denial of service. This is where essentially you hack a website, you get it to throw up an error, but what you do is you jam the website that many times so that it produces that many errors that essentially the website can't do anything else. It grinds to a halt. So this was a deliberate takedown of the web platform. This was a deliberate attack.
Happened continually, but to this, I mean, we had to pause No Silence. I think it was last May, so we actually put a pause on it. But to this day, somebody has actually got that website, and we can't even bring videos up. It's just there has to be some kind of governmental influence. I mean, and I can't go into it too much, but we were actually threatened. I was threatened. The press come after us. It was, well, they wouldn't stop us from speaking out because, you know, I know this sounds dramatic. They'd have to kill me first, because in my father's memory, and for all of these stories and all of these injured and all of these deaths, I don't care what I've got to do. I am always, always going to speak about this. And this is still going on. You know,
but you're not just going to. But you're not just going to speak about it. I mean, you've done far more than. Look, the thing is, people. Many of us have experienced. I believe it touched. I don't believe there's a single family that hasn't been touched adversely by the vaccine rollouts. But it's when you get someone like Ria who decides, even in the midst of her own trauma, to go out and help others. I know you talked about the amputees. You talked about, consolidating all the adverse reactions and, harrowing stories of fatalities the world over. Tell us about the lengths that you went to help people who were trying to get their loved ones out of care homes, because this was a big issue, certainly in the States. There were a number of, harrowing videos that were released, definitely in the UK, and I remember a couple of instances here in Australia. Can you tell us a bit about your work there and, the impact to these families?
Yeah. So with adverse reactions, I mean, there's one particular group of adverse reactions that kind of comes to mind. So my father, it was Colchester Hospital that my father was taken into, and I got a call, and when I had No More Silence, I got a call from a mum to say that her daughter was in the same hospital. It was in Colchester, and she'd had an adverse reaction. I think it was 18, yeah. And then it comes to light that the YMCA, or the YWCA, there's a woman's in Colchester, they'd actually rocked up to give everybody a jab at the YWCA. And these were some very young, 18, 19-year-old girls. And it was actually, they were going to give them AstraZeneca. And by this time, I think this was June 2021, and they'd already made a decision, I think in May, not to give the AstraZeneca to the under 30s. So they were, this is just one example. So they were threatened, if you don't have this jab, then you can't stay in the YMCA, or you can't stay in the... So they all took this jab, and we had 3 of them with an adverse reaction in Colchester Hospital. And it was exactly the same. It was, thankfully, they didn't die. They were very unwell, and one of the girls came out and she actually did a national news story. But I was then involved with other families, not just adverse reactions, but where we were also contacted by people. And when people heard my story about my father not being able to, us not getting out of the hospital and how he was treated, there was numerous cases of elderly and vulnerable. I'm not just saying elderly, I'm saying disabled as well.
Indeed.
We tried to intervene to get them out, and sadly, we couldn't get them out, and many of them died. Now, on the flip side of this as well, I can say with my hand on my heart, we have done everything in our power to help people in hospital, get them out of hospital. Now, some of these cases, the hospital care was very good, and because we can't say it wasn't. And there's a few cases where somebody's gone in with a respiratory type illness, COVID or whatever you want to call it, COPD, a respiratory type illness, and their natural course would be that they die, people die. And I think for me, what's become very, very difficult is I personally intervened in one case, and it was very, very clear. And you've got to remember, we have to record all the phone calls so that we can pass forward to family or whoever's involved. So this particular case, this gentleman was very, very unwell, and there's no way that he could have come out of hospital. His oxygen saturation was 60%. He couldn't come out of hospital. And because I was working with the hospital, it wasn't the family, it's like a truther movement. I, to this day, am labelled with I was complicit in murder. So Yeah, so the problem, and it goes on to this day. I mean, there's videos out at the moment, and it's not even from the family. They won't let this man rest. But the problem is, Jim, that because we were so involved in these cases, yes, we know the adverse reactions, and we know a lot of the elderly, we know a lot of the vulnerable were either denied treatment or they died in hospital. But on the other hand, when we were contacted by other families, some of the hospitals were exceptional. So we can't say it's, people sadly die, even before COVID, they die all the time. Now, if we're involved in a case where we're trying to get somebody out of hospital, but they can't because they are so unwell, then what we would do is we then work to ensure that what happened to my father in hospital doesn't happen. So this particular gentleman that apparently I was involved with, I was complicit in murder, we would then work with that family to ensure that they had the correct care in hospital and that they had a dignified death, meaning that the very thing that they're using to kill people, that should be used and is used in palliative care to ensure somebody has a dignified death. So in addition to the horror stories, we also have been working with hospitals that are exceptional. In this particular case, the hospital was exceptional, to make sure that the families are involved, that the families choose, if the patient is able to choose themselves, that their pathway to death is a dignified one. But I get, no matter what I do, there seems to be this division in, well, Jim, I don't have to tell you, there's all this division, and this hurts because I've given.
Ria, in the interest, sorry to cut in there, I just want to make a few things clear for the viewers, so, just so that we are absolutely clear on what's happening here. So, in these cases where you have been asked to oversee, to ensure, for example, that a patient has been given the due care and attention, because we've got to remember also that you are trained to a certain capacity, to a certain degree, to understand what sort of care and attention is needed for these patients in this situation. So you've got two situations there. Either you're saying, okay, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you're saying that in situations where you can see that there is mistreatment of a particular patient. In other words, they've not been given the correct treatment. They have been starved in some way, shape, or form. Then you would intervene. If the families believed, or if you believed in your professional capacity that this patient needs to be removed from that environment, would be safer at home or with their family, you would intervene in that situation.
Absolutely. So we work with huge care companies, and I'm involved in, we'll talk about what I'm involved in with some worldwide doctors in a moment. But so we work with, it's reablement packages. So we work with care companies to make sure that the care is in place at home, and the transition from, if they're able to, even if it's 24-hour care, that we transition people out of hospital into their home environment with their family. So that is our sole aim that was what I was very involved in, reablement. If that's possible. So we make sure that everything's in place for that to happen. But there are some instances where the patient is so unwell, and be that from anything at all, just because they're elderly or because, they're dying. But we also then work with the hospitals, the consultants, to ensure and make sure that the family have a voice.
So where possible, you've remained impartial.
Absolutely.
Your interest has been for the patient, for the well-being of the patient. But folks, I don't know whether you picked it up there, but on a number of occasions there, Ria has made it clear that the hospitals that administered the due care and attention for the benefit of the patient, she used the words, they were extraordinary. Am I to infer from that most hospitals, or the hospitals whereby patients were given due care and attention were few and far between, and they were acting out on right? So they were not acting according to protocol, because if they were, these patients wouldn't have fared so well. Is that correct?
Absolutely. I can honestly say there was so many hospitals that we were involved with, and I can only think of probably 2 that would work with us and that the staff was exceptional. The rest, you were either blocked, they couldn't speak to you. It was terrible. It was just dreadful. But the ones where we made a difference, and that was either got them out of hospital and got reablement, and then sadly there were some that they stayed in hospital and we managed to get their family in with them, and they had a dignified death, that they were on the correct pathway. But yeah, hardly so many of them. I had to stop doing it, in fact, because it was really traumatic.
I would imagine that the emotional, let's focus on that. I would imagine the emotional cost, the drain on yourself and the team that involved, and then to have to suffer, outrageous accusations that you were complicit in. I mean, I don't know how you cope with it.
Well, even to this day, there's one case at the moment, and I will say the name because I spoke to the family. There's one case at the moment, 2 years later, suddenly it's popped up. I know it'll be April, it'll be 2 years. And it was a gentleman that he was very, very unwell. He was in hospital. The hospital did everything. But there was this kind of like truther movement that were creating merry hell. And it's a very long story, so I can't go into it too much. But the hospital were exceptional with this family and with the gentleman that sadly died. But to this day, he's called Roland Ford, bless his heart. To this day, suddenly there's this truther called Laura Nina, who did a live on me just suddenly out of the blue, because she's somebody who seems to want her face all over the internet and to build a public platform. She states that I was complicit in this man's murder, or I worked with the hospital. Yes, I did work with the hospital because this man was dying. Now, I know the flip side, and I've helped families where the hospital have been wrong. In this case, they weren't. But only a few days ago, I mean, it's a trend for this woman. She decides she's going to go after somebody, and at the moment, it's me. But it's harrowing. It's awful. His family can't rest. She won't let his family rest. This poor man died, and she just won't let him rest.
So just to be clear, and I mean, obviously, I can't make a judgment either way because I don't know. I'd have to know the full details of the story. But just to be clear on the accusations here, this truther is claiming that you were complicit in how were you complicit in the death of this man? Given, and let's be clear, given that this patient was in the hands of the health authorities at the time, okay, you had gone in to check to do just to see whether the authorities were doing their due diligence. So you were satisfied that they were?
Well, so again, I've got every recording from the hospital, and
Right.
every recording from the hospital. And this gentleman, his oxygen saturation was down to about 60%. He had COPD. They also said that he had COVID. He did have a serious respiratory type illness, very, very serious. And these truthers wanted him out, and without question, they were told if he leaves the hospital without oxygen, he's going to die. In the end, long story short, his family were very involved. I was very involved with his family, and the consultants, and again, I've got every recording, the consultants every step of the way helped. In fact, the delay in treatment for this gentleman was because of these truthers creating merry hell at the hospital. You know, they were in there, the aggressiveness. Anyway, going forward, worked with his family, and this gentleman died. But I am now accused of working with the NHS and being complicit working with the NHS in his death. And yes, I did work with the NHS because this man was dying, and we then were in a position where he couldn't even sustain his oxygen saturations when he was off of CPAP. So at that point, with his family, the dignified death pathway that they often used to kill people was implemented, right. But that was with his family. But because, and this is where division comes in. Now, we've got somebody like this Laura Nina, that she wants to build her own public platform. Now, I can honestly say, Jim, and you know this, in the 2 years I've been involved with thousands of vaccine injured, I have never, ever done interviews because
no, that's correct.
This is not about building my public platform. This is not about my face. This is about people behind. But you've got these hanger-oners that suddenly, oh, it's all about me, want to build my public platform. Come after.
Well, I mean, it's actually quite extraordinary that you won't know this, Ria, because I know you're not on Twitter. You won't know this because, all right. So, Plannedillusion, as you know, has got a blog section. I've got people who submit blogs. It turns out that Samantha, who's based up in the northwest of England, she submitted a post which I approved 24 hours ago, essentially talking about this phenomena of individuals who are they want to project these doom and gloom stories just for the purpose of garnering attention and building up their platform. And funny enough, you know, as I do, I posted a preview of the blog on Twitter, and already there were, there was a few individuals who have reacted to that fact. Now, here's the thing. And we've had conversations about this over the 2 years because we would touch base and speak privately. unfortunately, it is a real problem that there are certain individuals who are supposedly in the truther camp, that they're there for their own clout. Okay.
Absolutely. I mean,
and here's the thing, and well, this is it. This is it. So I've got a couple of questions I want to ask you, because going back to when, say, for example, you first started putting out your story, and you had even, you know, Stephen Wells did the speech. You did the video that got taken down unceremoniously. What's your take on people like Dr. John Campbell, 2.6 million YouTube subscribers, still going strong, proclaiming vaccine damages and what have you? You've got Dr. Nazim, oh, his surname, Dr. Malhotra, Malhotra, okay, and also you've got Dr. Peter McCullough. The waving the flag. If in actual fact, Dr. Peter McCullough is going to be in Sydney in the International Conference Centre giving a talk which you can purchase for $60, giving a talk, an anti-mRNA vaccine jab talk. He's been allowed a visa to come into the country. I would just like your comment on that.
Well, going forward, I mean, first of all, going back to these people with their public platforms, the very woman that I was on about, she, in her live, actually stated that I was an infiltrator and that my father never died of the vaccine. And yeah, so this is what's hurtful. So my father never died of the vaccine, that I'm an infiltrator, that I'm, you know, was complicit in somebody's murder. And something we've not discussed is when you say Peter McCullough and, you know, people like that. When No More Silence, we decided to pause No More Silence. And that was because I've got a healthcare background, and I was contacted by some brilliant doctors that were starting to treat the vaccine injured. And I was already, that we had so many vaccine injured. I then started to work with the FLCCC, and in particular, an amazing doctor called Dr. Pierre Corey. And he's part of a group of, there's Paul Merrick and Ryan Cole, and, you know, they do Defeat the Mandates. And these guys, they lost their professions. They spoke out and they were helping the vaccine.
Yeah. So in actual fact, they lost their licenses, didn't they? They were right.
Honestly, and Pierre Corey, he's one of my dearest friends, and I work with him, and we now work with the vaccine injured and long COVID, and it's called Long Haulers. So when you ask me to comment on Campbell or Peter McCullough, etc., what I won't do, yes, I'll always do my due diligence on anybody that I'm personally involved with.
Indeed.
So, and I collaborate now with some of the biggest names around the world to help the vaccine injured. So I am personally, I've done my due diligence. I know what good people they are. But what I won't do, Jim, and what other people should not be doing, is making a decision on, is somebody an infiltrator or, you know, controlled opposition or paid opposition, without you truly knowing that. Because I can tell you, you know, people will turn around and say, oh, she's talking about Ria. Oh, she's got, you know, a lovely house in Spain and she's got whatever, Jim, I'm a 58-year-old woman. Before all of this, I had an incredible career. I had my own clinic. You know, my husband's done very well. We haven't got children. We built, nobody's given us it. We built a nice lifestyle for ourselves. But I effectively retired. Now, I only come back into this because of what happened to my father. So I'm now viewed, and there's other people, you know, and you know, I'll say her name, there's all these people in the movement that have done so much, like Kate Shamarani, myself, but they'll turn around and they'll say, oh, you're controlled opposition, oh, your father didn't die. And you're thinking to yourself, I would never do the same. So if it was about you, Jim, or it was about anybody, unless I knew this person and I knew it for sure, I can't say who.
Well, look, I mean, look, and I'm glad that Ria's made that public. You know, it it almost is an echo of a well, it wasn't rebuttal. I made a reply to a comment that was made to that very same blog, you know, on Plannedillusion regarding that. Firstly, I'm just going to say that, look, your statement there and your comment there, that's fair. That's a fair statement. You're absolutely right. Until you know someone directly, you can't say. And you know what? I've been called controlled opposition for one reason or other. You know, I'm not. And the funny thing is, the accusation came from two separate people, but during the same week, which I thought was funny. And even today, because I have made certain decisions about what content I will put on certain platforms, what I decide to reserve on my website, that people have got reservations about me. So you're absolutely right. I mean, because all it does is what you're alluding to is just cause division.
Absolutely. I see that in every. It's so sad now, because even the vaccine injured, there's division. The truth is there's division.
Yes.
We should be in a position where, you know, people come together, and we can be a force if we come together. But do not judge somebody if you don't know. I mean, don't just go on doing a live thing, oh, he, she, him, her, controlled opposition. And it's cruel. And I have to say, and something that's absolutely factual about this, and I've got to speak about this. This all happened, strangely enough, when there is, I'm working with an incredible guy. He's called Rob Verkerk. He's a scientist. He was the founder of the World Council for Health. And he works in, his speciality is about frequency devices.
Right.
Now, and he's done some incredible, he's really, really well known, and he's done some incredible articles lately on, you know, are they harmful or not for treating people? So, you know, all these different frequency devices. So what's happened in the vaccine injured, all of a sudden, every man and his dog's coming out saying, oh, you know, buy a terahertz wand or buy this and it's going to help you. Well, there's this very dangerous device. I'm still involved very much with the vaccine injured, and it's called iTeracare 5 terahertz wand, and it's like a blower wand. Well, it's a pyramid selling company. And wow. One guy called Ethan Leeds right at the top. And suddenly a load of the vaccine injured are given these free wands, and they got damaged from it. But all of a sudden, this whole pyramid scheme where people are making, I've got voice recordings of one of these women saying, oh, from the vaccine injured, I can make 30,000 a month. Okay, yeah. So as we came out and, you know, with the vaccine injured that got injured from this 5 Teracare wand, we are about to produce, we've had this wand tested, and Rob Verkerk, within the next 2 weeks, we are going to be bringing out an expose on this wand. And all of this truther movement, Ethan Leeds, Laura Nina, and all of them are involved in the pyramid selling scheme. So what's happened is there is a whole back kick to that. They are, again, they're trying to silence. I was one of the people that everybody went after, the media went after initially because of No More Silence exposing the vaccine injured. But because I will not sit back and allow the injured to be injured again with this pyramid selling scheme, and this one that they're using, I'm about to expose it again. So people that are so-called truthers who are going to be earning in this pyramid selling scheme, they have now come after me because they're doing.
Yeah, I can imagine. Look, all I'm going to say is this. Look, all I'm going to say is this. Look, at the end of the day, we need to ensure that critical thinking isn't taken out the equation. That's all. I'm all for, you know, removing indiscriminate accusations and causing undue, division in the camp. But I mean, my gosh, when you've got a situation like that where, because let's face it, you're dealing with human beings, we're not perfect. There will be a subset of people who are going to be in it for money. It's as simple as that. Now, is it a stretch that there are certain doctors who, were advocating for one thing
And then
and now switching, right? That okay? All right. That's the first thing. That's the second thing is that I'm asking people to just look at is governments are normally consistent with the way they handle information that they deem to be threatening or whatever else. Okay, so you don't get a situation where visas will be removed if you're a threat for A, B, and C reason for this group of people, but for another group of people, suddenly, no. What I'm trying to say is this: when you've got platforms, people being deplatformed, doctors, medical professionals, and whatever else, getting their licenses revoked, their livelihoods destroyed, but others are allowed to make public amphitheatre flipping statements.
Well, absolutely. I mean, a prime example is Pierre Corey. That poor man. I mean, he's got a young family. He was a critical care pulmonologist. He was in the throes of dealing with the respiratory illness that hit in the outset. If you look at the FLCCC and what they did, and he discovered with Paul Merrick repurposed medications that could treat COVID or could treat even the flu or respiratory type illness that was hitting. And it was bad at the time. But then when, the vaccine came out, or when they tried to roll out these repurposed medications, they were blocked. No, you can't do that. And obviously what they've had to do now, they've had to leave their jobs. They've set up huge companies which are non-profits. You can go on and download, their protocols for vaccine injury for free, their protocols for respiratory illnesses for free, spike protein illness for free. They don't earn any money, and they are blocked, vilified.
Right.
Even the drug ivermectin. Dare you say ivermectin? So you've got those set of guys, and they're the guys that I work with. Those are the guys that I work with. And yes, you're very right. There's another set of guys that suddenly get their licenses back. Everything is up on, their Twitter accounts are still there. So yes, I asked myself that. But the problem is, Jim, I am actually so busy with helping the vaccine injured, doing what I'm doing, and working with these doctors. My head is in a spin at the moment, because what these people do, the people that come after you, they then divert
your attentions, yes.
And the precious time. The 5 Terracare wand, the way that you want to see how they've gone after the vaccine injured and there's a guy called Ethan Leeds, the videos, the vile videos he's done about the vaccine injured. There's a friend of mine that I want you to interview. She's called Angelia Dizelle, very severely vaccine injured. She spoke out about her vaccine injury, and it had over 70 million views. And that 70, and I mean, my father's, his 2-year anniversary had 12.6 million views. But she spoke out, oh my goodness. She ended up having to, well, the horrors that they did. She ended up, she's American, ended up in all the press all over the world saying that because she has really bad seizures and tremors, and they made memes about her, they mocked her. There was mainstream media, journalists. It was horrific, Jim. You need her on to cover her story. And we then had my set of doctors, you know, Pierre Corey and Del Bigtree did interviews, and Steve Kirsch, trying to support her. But imagine when people come after us, you know, we are human. We know our truth. I know my truth. And
yeah, look, I mean, it's got to be absolutely harrowing. And look, I think that also, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I think, you know, to start to round off this interview, I mean, we've got to the stage now where basically we know that a tactic of the enemy is to cause as much confusion as possible, muddy the waters with information and disinformation, the whole 9 yards. And so how do you deal with it? Well, Ria, you mentioned knowing your truth and sticking by it and not getting deterred with all the noise, just being absolutely focused, doing what you're doing to help. That's the main thing. You know, what are you, and you see, here's the thing, like I said in the post today on Plannedillusion, you know, I do those basic things. I say we do those basic things and let the God of the universe judge the rest. Because trust me, there is a judgment. You know, so because we're limited, as you quite rightly said, there's only so much and the enemy knows that. He knows that we get emotional. He knows that we've got physically, whatever else. I mean, we're all 3 years older from this. My gosh, the trauma that we've been through, all of us, the changes to our lives, the whole 9 yards. It's been horrendous. And yet, you know, as you know, I'm a Christian, I'm going to say it, by God's grace, we're still here fighting the good fight. And so, look.
I mean, I'm not,
we do.
You said about you're a Christian. Now, the strange thing with me is that, I mean, I have a belief, but the very strange thing with me is after my father died, I'd never been in a position where I really believed in anything, but everything, I don't want to sound like a wacko, but everything I do to this day is guided by my father. And I will never stop that. I mean, even before I came on this interview with you, Jim, I caught myself, my father had a favourite song, and I was just walking around the house and my husband said to me, Ria, listen to what you're singing. And it was a song called Where Do You Go To, My Lovely? And I was singing that at the top of my voice, and I thought, hang on a minute, I'm going on this interview and I never go on interviews. And here I am singing this song. And I feel through this, I was brought up to tell my truth. And my father would be so proud to know that his story and other people's stories are on platform like yours, are out there when that's being suppressed. And there's something, he's with me every day, and I will continue to tell his truth, the vaccine injured's truth, and my truth. And although this is uncomfortable, what these truthers or whoever they are say and do, there's something that we've got to continue. Be that, and we've got to have a faith and something that carries us through the horror.
Without a doubt. And look, here's the thing, for all those who are watching this who are anti-Christian, or for all those who are watching this that believe that everything's got to be Christ focused. Look, I'm going to say very, very clearly, all right, you do what you have to do with your conscience. The supreme power that's out there, I call him God. He will decide who's right and who's wrong at the appointed time. Don't worry about the next person's belief. Focus on your belief first and foremost. Because I tell you something, you're not going to, listen, you're going to be judged by yourself. By yourself. And by the way, you're going to be judged on your actions. Okay, your actions. I will leave. I'll leave you. I'll leave you, Ria, with the last word on that.
But as simple as this, Jim, it doesn't matter what's your belief, your religion. There is a path of good. There is a path of evil. Choose to go the right way, no matter what. Choose to be on the side of humanity and choose to be on the side of good. And if you can just do that with or without a belief, that's what we need to do. But we know there is dark and light, and we know that sadly there's very little light at the moment, and we need to shine and stay in that light, and just be kind. Just be kind to each other.
Amen.
Help each other. Just be kind.
Amen. Folks, as I say, I will never forget that first interview that we did, because I remember for a good few days, it took me a good few days to edit it down, because it was just so harrowing. Little did any of us know, actually, that it was the blueprint for what was going to be happening to so many countless people. I mean, Ria would not have known that she'll be deluged by similar accounts all over the world, but this is where we were. And throughout that time, we've always stayed in contact. Plannedillusion was just it was a small outfit then. I never imagined actually that the platform would grow to this point whereby, researchers, doctors, nurses, all sorts of what I could call reputable professionals all over the world would congregate on this platform to do their bit for humanity. And the fact that they even saw this platform as a credible place that they could call home, where they believed that I would treat their account with the due care and attention. But also, I didn't imagine that I'd have the support. The support that I had from you guys all over the world has been absolutely fantastic. But I will say this, in the bid to grow the platform, we've got a beautiful website, which, just like Ria, you get your hands dirty, don't you? You build it yourself, sort of thing, and created a place where we could hold seminars. We had Dr. Andrew Kaufman, Tom Cowan, and even Kate Shimrani come on and host seminars. It was a privilege that I could create something that people could find useful. Now I'm at the stage whereby we want to get to the next level, where we're doing face-to-face interviews, where we are extending the platform so that it can host much more content, a wider amount of content, and the videos, because just like what Ria said with the websites getting attacked, I'm a software developer like her husband. I understand, or was forewarned about what could happen, so I took steps. But this is cost me, and it's got to the point now where the cost for the platform has got to a point where I'm struggling to manage it. Given, I think this will be what, the 93rd or 94th episode on there. You know, people say to me, "Oh, why don't you get a better mic, or you should get better camera?" You're absolutely right, but you know, the material I put on there is for free.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. The hours of editing, the time to schedule, my time, the cost of the website, web server, video server, I have been paying for it. But now it's grown to a point where I'm struggling. And literally, I'm saying to you guys, if you want to see more of this material and to a better and better level, better productions, in-house interviews, engagements with you, the public, you know, to be able to do the kind of interviews that Ria wants me to do, you know, and some of you also want me to do, you know, your help in terms of funds, either donations, is important.
So many, you know, No More Silence and so many of these other platforms, the good platforms, you know, like Plannedillusion, so many of them had to close because we're in a, and it's so sad because nobody else is covering what you're covering, and we're in a position where it costs money. You know, it costs money, as you say, for websites, etc. And even your time, you know, your time, you could be working somewhere else. And what we need to do is, people need to make a contribution. If you buy a newspaper or, you know, even a Substack or whatever, but we need platforms like yours to stay up. And, you know, you have people, so many people that will, you know, buy me a coffee or have, but I'm in agreement with somebody like Jim. You have to, and Plannedillusion, just give a contribution. It's so necessary to keep these platforms up because you're not going to be seeing them in mainstream media, and platforms like yours are dropping off. Plannedillusion are dropping off because it costs money. You've been doing this for nearly 3 years or more. So people need to make a contribution if they see this. They do. Because otherwise,
absolutely.
Where are we going to go?
Well, I mean, this is it. Look, for me, it's been a labour of love, but like yourself, Ria, I was compelled to do this, you know, and I've been carried on by a crest. I mean, so I covered your story. There was Wayne Cunningham, you know, who took the AstraZeneca. That guy, his prognosis for the foreseeable future is a dire one. And if it wasn't for Plannedillusion, well, and it was myself and I believe Richie Allen, that's it. You know, the truth about that story, his story wouldn't have got out there. You know, I've hosted the virus debate.
We need your platform because we're in a position where I have got so many vaccine injured that want to tell their story. We can't keep No More Silence up for many reasons. And Jim, your phone would be ringing off the hook. People need to get their stories out there. You need to be doing these, but without platforms like yours, how are we going to do this? You know, we need somebody who, you know, can interview. So people need to just give a contribution and let all the people that I know, all the vaccine injured and all the families where they've lost loved ones or can't get their families out of care homes, let them come on to Jim, let him interview them. But, you know, you have to give a contribution.
Indeed. Well, look, on that note, folks, I will say I want a big thank you to those people who have made small contributions. For those of you out there, if you're interested in making a contribution, just simply go to plannedillusion.com/support, and you can make a one-off contribution, or you can, you can commit to, a monthly. And look, it's literally, as little as the cost of a cup of coffee or what have you, and for those who feel that they'd rather get something for it, I do have premium content. I also make long form documentaries, which literally suck the life out of me, but they are worthwhile documentaries. And for that, I believe that even that, it's like £4, but just, if you feel you want to get something for it. But look, everything helps. And at this stage, as I say, I have got a shopping list of things that need to be done in terms of interviews and exposés and what have you. But for those of you who have, thank you so much. So on that note, Ria, it's been an absolute pleasure getting you back on the show. I think we've covered a hell of a lot, and it's nice to see also that in terms of though we've been apart, mindset's pretty much the same, and you've come to the same place where you're like, well, hang on a second, I need to focus just on the most important things: love for my neighbor and for those who need it that I can help with. And let's not get stuck in the whole division thing. That's not going to change, folks. That's always going to be there. But what can change is what we do about it. Let's just ignore it. Just ignore it.
Well, I need to thank you, Jim, because when this happens, we are human, and when the division happens or somebody comes after you, it's such a personal level. There's certain people that you can reach out to, and you were one of them for me. And being able to even come on and talk about this, it's a therapy. It was when my father died, and you were there then, and you're here again now. And again, that is the importance of having somebody like you in this movement. It's so important.
Indeed, and I would like to continue doing that. I mean, I also need encouragement as well. And for me, you look at some of us do anyway. We look at what is our purpose, and if I can wake up in the morning, believe that I'm serving a purpose that's much bigger than myself, then I'm happy with that, regardless of what it costs me. If the moment that I'm not doing anything other than being self-serving, that's a problem for me. I'm not happy with that. Okay. But anyway, listen, folks, I'm going to, wind it up. The message is pretty clear. We're at the point now where it's fair to say the battle's only just beginning now. But you know what? Through this, we've been fashioned into that which is required to fight the rest of the way. Okay. The beauty about this is, if you look on Plannedillusion at Instagram, I've got a post on there that says, what was it? The best or the most arduous battles in life are reserved for the best soldiers. We're soldiers. Okay. So on that note, I'm going to love you and leave you. Thanks for watching the show. Like I say, if you want to make a contribution, if not, there's lots of free content. You're at total liberty to watch and check out the other videos. Until the next episode, see you soon. Goodbye. Goodbye, Ria.
Thank you. I'm still involved very much with the vaccine injured. Yes, I'll always do my due diligence on anybody that I'm personally involved with. There is a path of good, there is a path of evil. Choose to be on the side of humanity and choose to be on the side of good.